Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I am Munib Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the Taliban would be judged on their actions, not their words. Addressing the parliament, he said the NATO alliance does not want to restart military actions in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, the UK's army chief said the world should give the Taliban the space to form a new government as the group has become more reasonable. Earlier, the European Union has acknowledged the Taliban's victory in Afghanistan, saying it is ready to begin talks with them. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi had told his Chinese counterpart that he would visit regional countries to build a consensus on Afghanistan. Speaking over the phone, the two ministers agreed to remain in contact on shared interests, particularly the Afghan situation. The exchange between the two sides comes after China said it is ready to deepen friendly and cooperative relations with the Taliban. In Pakistan, security forces have killed a terrorist during an operation in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. The military's media wing said a soldier was also martyred in the exchange of fire. The United Nations nuclear watchdog says Iran has accelerated its enrichment of uranium to near weapons grade. However, Iran reiterated that its nuclear program is peaceful and said it had informed the agency about its enrichment activities. This comes just a day after the IAEA revealed that Iran made progress in its work on enriched uranium metal. Brazil has recorded over 1,100 deaths from COVID-19 and more than 37,000 infections overnight. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 66 more people lost their lives to the virus and over 3,900 tested positive in the last 24 hours. Globally, the coronavirus caseload has surpassed 208 million, while the death toll is over 4.38 million. Well, these were the top stories. News in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the Taliban will be judged by their actions, not their words. He was addressing the parliament, which was recalled from its summer break to discuss the situation in Afghanistan. More details in this report.
While the political structure of Kabul government remains unclear, the Taliban have underscored their commitment to peace and human rights, saying they do not want to live in isolation and seek friendly relations with the world. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says London will do everything it could to avert a humanitarian crisis in the war-torn country. Talking to the parliament, he said the United Kingdom will welcome up to 20,000 Afghans under a new resettlement program. Meanwhile, Britain's army chief stressed the Taliban must be given space to form a new government, as they might be more reasonable this time. The European Union also acknowledged the Taliban's victory in Afghanistan, saying it is ready to begin talks with them. However, the bloc insisted that dialogue does not imply formal recognition of the Taliban in the near future. Earlier, the United States and the United Kingdom agreed to hold an online summit of G7 leaders over the situation in Afghanistan. The White House says President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Boris Johnson stressed the need for continued close coordination among allies. In the United States, members of the Congress, including many Democrats, have vowed to probe the Biden administration over its execution of withdrawal. Washington has frozen Afghan government reserves held in the United States bank accounts, blocking the Taliban from accessing billions of dollars.
Now, the U.S. has found human remains in the wheel well of a military plane that took off from the Kabul airport. In a statement, the U.S. Air Force said it has opened an investigation into the deaths after panicked Afghans swarmed the aircraft.
Local media cited a Taliban commander as saying that at least 40 people died in the stampede and shooting at their airport on Monday. Meanwhile, former Vice President Amrullah Saleh has claimed he is the caretaker president of Afghanistan in Ashraf Ghani's absence. As the group consolidated power, the Taliban said their leader, Mullah Abdul Ghani Bradar, has returned to Afghanistan from Qatar. In Kabul, Taliban commander Uns Haqqani has met former President Hamid Karzai and former peace envoy Abdullah Abdullah amid the group's efforts to set up a government. Earlier, women in Kabul protested the Taliban's takeover as several were reportedly ordered to leave their jobs across the country. However, Kabul residents have cautiously ventured back to the markets, expressing their hope for peace and stability in the country.
Now, Pakistan says a peaceful and stable Afghanistan is of critical importance for the country and the region. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said this to his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi in a phone call. Qureshi laid emphasis on an inclusive political settlement for which he said all Afghans will have to work together. The foreign minister also called for the international community to continue economic engagement in Afghanistan. He acknowledged the significant contributions made by China and Pakistan as part of the Troika Plus. Moreover, Qureshi told Wang about Islamabad's efforts for facilitating the evacuations from Afghanistan. Both sides agreed to remain in contact on shared interests, particularly the Afghanistan situation. Pakistan says India has played the role of a spoiler in the Afghan peace process. This follows the Taliban's military takeover in Afghanistan and the subsequent chaos as thousands try to flee. More in this report by our correspondent, Manahil Ahmed.
Pakistan has been the only country that consistently maintained that there is no military solution to the conflict in Afghanistan.
To come to some sort of a political settlement.
It facilitated 3 major milestones in the Afghan peace process, starting from the peace agreement between the US and the Taliban. Speaking exclusively to Indus News, Pakistan's National Security Advisor Dr. Moeed Yusuf said India spent a lot of money in Afghanistan to develop an anti-Pakistan clout.
First of all, there's no question they are a spoiler. They've been a spoiler since this began. Their strategy was essentially to use international military presence and under that cover to develop clout in Afghanistan, anti-Pakistan clout in Afghanistan. They poured tons of money into nefarious activities. If they were doing development and economic assistance, we would have no problem. But really, their focus has been to subvert Pakistan and destabilize Pakistan.
It was then followed by the initiation of the Afghan inter-talks and the agreement on rules and procedures. While many other countries supported the peace efforts, Foreign Office spokesperson Zahid Hafiz Chaudhry says India played the role of a spoiler.
The international community, the Afghans themselves, they need to be aware of the spoilers. And these spoilers can be within Afghanistan and outside Afghanistan also. And when we say outside Afghanistan, we do certainly see India as a spoiler. We have evidence that India has used the Afghan soil against Pakistan. We shared a dossier in which we provided solid evidence, irrefutable evidence, how India used a third country to for terrorism inside Pakistan.
Following the Taliban takeover, India has closed all of its consulates, including the embassy in Kabul. It has also evacuated 140 Indians on a special military flight on Tuesday morning. Manahil Ahmed, Indus News, Islamabad.
Meanwhile, Pakistan has sent back its ambassador to Kabul days after the Taliban took over control of the country's capital. Interior Minister Sheikh Rashid confirmed that Ambassador Mansoor Ahmed Khan returned to Kabul by road via the Tokhum border. Khan returned to Islamabad in July, a day after the former Afghan government called back its ambassador after the alleged kidnapping of his daughter in Islamabad. The minister added the situation along the border with Afghanistan is normal. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, security forces have killed a terrorist during an operation in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. The military's media wing said a soldier was also martyred in the exchange of fire. It said a search operation is in progress to eliminate any terrorists. The Pakistan Army is determined to eliminating the menace of terrorism from the country. Moving on now, the UN nuclear watchdog says Iran has accelerated its uranium enrichment to near weapons grade. The weapons grade is around 90% purity. Iran has reiterated that its nuclear program is peaceful and said it had informed the agency about its enrichment activities. The Foreign Ministry spokesperson Saeed Khatibzadeh said Iran's countermeasures will be reversible if the US returns to the 2015 deal. Now, this comes just a day after the IAEA revealed that Iran made progress in its work on enriched uranium metal. Brazil has recorded over 1,100 deaths from COVID-19 and more than 37,000 infections overnight. Globally, the caseload has surpassed 208 million, while the death toll is over 4.38 million. More details about the pandemic in this report.
While the Delta variant has prompted restrictive measures, protests against lockdowns and vaccine rules have gained momentum. In Canada, demonstrations were gathered in Laval, Quebec, against the requirement of a vaccine passport to enter gyms. The United States has extended the face mask mandate for travelers through the 18th of January to address ongoing COVID-19 risks. While both the Washington, D.C. and New York moved to impose vaccine directives on healthcare workers. Meanwhile, the controversies on the COVID-19 origin studies keep stirring up. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro said the politicization of origin tracing efforts is nothing more than a dirty trick by the United States.
Attempting to attack China by manipulating the virus origin tracing and politicizing it, in our opinion, is using dirty tricks to attack a noble country. China has contributed its scientific research results to the world to fight against the pandemic. While the country itself was a victim of the pandemic in the beginning, the investigation into the pandemic should go deeper instead of becoming a geopolitical manipulation by the US against China.
The International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies said Southeast Asia need more help securing vaccines, as the region struggles to contain record infections and deaths driven by the Delta variant. New Zealand has recorded 2 new cases of coronavirus, taking the total number to 7 in the latest outbreak. Meanwhile, a new study says that young men could be at a higher risk of contracting COVID-19 than is currently recognized.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 66 more people have died of coronavirus over the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the death toll has reached 24,639. It said the virus infected nearly 4,000 people in the past 24 hours. The positivity rate of overnight cases was recorded at 6.91%. The ministry said Pakistan's caseload has exceeded 1.1 million, of which more than 996,000 people have recovered. The number of active cases has topped 88,000, while over 4,800 are in critical condition. Now, in India, the Assam-Mizoram border dispute has flared up once again after a crossfiring between the police of the northeastern state. Mizoram authorities alleged that Assam police opened fire on 3 Mizo civilians, injuring 1. They said the 3 from Mizoram's Kolasib district went to collect normal supply meat in Assam's Hailakandi. However, officials from Assam claimed that firing began from the other side. Earlier on the 26th of July, 7 people, including 6 Assam policemen, were killed and over 50 others were injured in border clashes. Now, New Delhi's harsh anti-terror law faced intensified scrutiny from Indian courts and legal experts. The National Crime Records Bureau said over 1,900 people were arrested under the law in 2019 alone.
The Unlawful Activities Prevention Act was introduced by the now opposition Congress Party in 2018. In 2019, the BJP government amended the law, allowing authorities to categorize individuals as terrorists. It allows detentions without evidence, and people often spend months and years in jail without being found guilty. Now, some in India are calling for reform. Supreme Court's former Justice Madan Lokur says the provisions of the laws are quite vague and can be used indiscriminately to crush dissent. He said heavy costs should be imposed on the police for frivolous arrests. Supreme Court's former Justice Madan Lokur says the provisions of the laws are quite vague and can be used indiscriminately to crush dissent. He said the heavy costs should be imposed on the police for frivolous arrests. Last month, the death of rights activist Father Stan Swami in judicial custody touched a nerve. The 84-year-old Jesuit priest had been jailed since 2020 under the same law alongside 15 other activists and academics. Authorities said he had links to Maoist rebels, but Swami maintained that he was singled out for his work on caste injustice.
More news coming up after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, in Lebanon, Hezbollah movement's leader Hassan Nasrallah says the US-led NATO mission in Afghanistan has failed miserably. In a televised speech, Nasrallah said the scenes of Kabul are completely identical to the scenes of Saigon in Vietnam. He said President Joe Biden withdrew forces because the US could no longer afford the consequences of staying in Afghanistan. He said the US has come out of the country humiliated and defeated despite spending $1 trillion. He added Washington is still ignorant and is repeating the same mistakes. Malaysia's royal palace says King Al Sultan Abdullah will name a new prime minister soon. However, the new appointee will have to face a confidence vote in the country's parliament. In a statement, the palace said the new premier must table the motion to legitimately prove his majority. The king has also asked members of the parliament to name one candidate they want as premier. The winning candidate will have to put together a coalition as no political party ensures a majority in the parliament. On Monday, Muhyiddin Yassin resigned as prime minister after losing majority in the parliament. Meanwhile, in Myanmar, the death toll of civilians following the February 1st coup has topped 1,000. Assistance Association of Political Prisoners says over 1,000 people have been killed by security forces during the crackdown. The military previously said the organization's figures are exaggerated. The army has also said scores of members of the security forces have been killed, which have not been included. Myanmar has plunged into chaos since the overthrow of the government. Daily protests are damaging the economy while insurgencies flare in border regions. Now, in Haiti, the death toll from the Saturday's powerful earthquake has risen to 1,941. Authorities say many people are still missing after the 7.2 magnitude quake hit the country's southwest. Authorities fear the numbers of casualties may rise as they search for victims and survivors under the rubble. Rescue work has been hindered by heavy rains amid the tropical storm Grace to the Caribbean nation. Hospitals struggle to tend to all those injured, the official tally of which has risen to 9,915. Medics say that they are doing their best but are unable to cope with all the patients.
There are children who've had their skin sewn. Others have had surgery. There are children who had a limb put into an aid. There are children here whose medical situation is not related to the quake. For example, some of them have fever.
Well, the UN says over 500,000 children are affected by the disaster and left with limited or no access to shelter, safe water and food. Now, in the US, the rapidly expanding Calder fire in California has injured 2 people and prompted evacuation orders for thousands. Officials say that the blaze has burned over 30,000 acres of land so far. More about the fires across the globe in this report.
Fires driven by heat wave and accompanied by strong winds have wreaked havoc across the globe. In the United States, gas and electricity connections have been shut off to 51,000 customers in the state of California amid the surging wildfire. In Spain, winds have hindered the efforts of firefighters to battle the country's biggest blaze of the year. Officials say the fire has destroyed at least 37,000 acres of land as evacuations are underway. Moreover, firefighters in Greece are battling 2 fires on the outskirts of the capital, Athens. In Bolivia, raging fires turned the red sky in San Matthias as firefighters struggle to tame fierce flames. Officials have declared 5 ravaged areas a disaster zone. Officials say almost 60,000 acres of forest has been burnt in the country so far this year. Meanwhile, in Jerusalem, a blaze that had been burning for over 3 days is finally contained. It caused the evacuation of hundreds of families from 10 villages and burnt over 2,500 hectares of forest.
China's Mars rover Churong has accomplished its exploration and detection task as planned. The country's National Space Administration says the rover worked on the red planet surface for 90 Martian days. Officials say so far the orbiter is in good condition and is moving steadily ahead for further exploration. The 240-kilogram solar-powered rover has travelled 889 meters distance on the surface of Mars. The mission has so far collected over 420 gigabytes of data. This includes visuals of land, features, analysis of soil samples, and readings of the Martian atmosphere. Researchers say the mission has helped them learn more about the past and present of the desolate planet. The lander carrying the rover touched down in the northern hemisphere of Mars on 15th of May. In Ivory Coast, an artist has turned discarded flip-flops from the beach into masterpieces. He carves rubber soles to turn them into valuable portraits and abstract art. More details in this report.
As Aristide Kwame combed the beach, dragging the trash bag of waterlogged flip-flops, many thought of him as either a desperate trader or a madman. Little did they know that he would be converting them into stunning artworks as valuable as $1,000. His unique methods have garnered wide acclaim, and his art has hung in galleries throughout West Africa and parts of Europe.
When I go pick up the waste, there are a lot of questions, such as what will I do with all this? Will you sell the flip-flops? I simply respond that I'm an artist. And by picking up the waste, I'm removing this burden on nature. I'm removing something that disturbs the beach because I don't like to see it dirty.
Kwame's work range from large portraits of civil rights leaders to abstracts evoking societal ills like climate change, COVID-19, and wealth inequality. All are made from old shoes that he finds floating in the ocean.
This work is about COVID-19 because that's what dominates the news these days. As an artist, I consider myself a witness of my time. That's why I produced this work, not only to show that this is a dangerous disease, but also to be an additional push in the fight against it.
Plastic waste can be found strewn across many of West Africa's urban beaches. According to the United Nations, around 13 million tons of plastic waste are dumped into the world's oceans each year.
Now, European stocks have declined as investors monitor inflation data and wait for minutes from a meeting of the Fed Policy Committee. CAC 40 in Paris led the losses, dropping more than 0.25%. Italy's FTSE MIB dipped marginally. FTSE in London also shed over 0.25%. Frankfurt's DAX edged nearly 0.25% lower. The Pan-European Stock 600 index hovered around the flat line. And now let's have a look at how the weather is doing around the world. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.